Yeah, the hybrid event I think is new to us, the online thing especially. But thank you everyone for like those of you that are online watching and those of you here. Yeah, this is a satellite event as part of Romanian Design Week Go, and it's really exciting for us to be here in Bucharest because we've spent some time here, but we've never actually got to do anything here properly, like no events, no projects. So it's really cool for us to be here with such interesting and inspiring and exciting people. And we're really looking forward to sharing some of our projects and our ideas and also learning about yours. So yeah, we're kind of really looking forward to getting into this, because the reason we did this was that we wanted to look at people and possible kind of alternative routes through architecture. So not necessarily the conventional routes that many people follow, but people who've done things a little differently and are going their own way, because that's what we ourselves talk about a lot, and that's what we find to be really quite inspiring and motivating for the things that we do. And so to begin with, we'll be doing a short talk about some of kind of the problems, challenges and doubts and insecurities that we have and from the work that we've done. And then Stardust will be giving a talk about a couple of their projects, and Super.Serios will follow that with a game which we'll be playing, and then some discussions about the themes that come up from the game and the talks today. For us, we're going to be talking about a couple of projects that we've done. One which was a little pavilion that we did in Malaga, and on Spain's Costa del Sol, and the other is a renovation of a former pottery studio, an art studio and house in England's Lake District. The Costa del Sol Pavilion, which is the first project, that was done after a couple of years of research and exhibitions and kind of quite hands-on work on the Costa del Sol. It was quite kind of random work that we did there, really, but that was funded by the West Yorkshire Society of Architects, who helped us to do that. And we started off doing different sort of exhibitions in abandoned structures, and then an exhibition with the council, and trying to engage the community a bit in the discussion about what was happening. Then it became my graduation project, and in the summer, in the middle of my graduation, I guess I was a bit bored, a bit frustrated, a little impatient, and wanted to build something for real, and we made this full-scale model that brought some of the concepts and ideas that we'd been looking at over the past couple of years. And so we brought that into this structure and this object, which we built and put on the edge of the sprawling landscape of Spain. With Cove Cottage, this is the project that we're exhibiting here at Romanian Design Week. This was the renovation of a former art and pottery studio and home in Lake District, and it's a 3-bedroom house based around one double-height room, and there's bathrooms off that, and a lot of our work there on that project was kind of the bare bones of the building, like stripping it down, re-insulating it, making it habitable again after 60 years of nobody being able to, nobody doing any work on the project, really. So there was a lot of basic work, but then also the more superficial work, which is kind of the stuff that is visible in the photos, which is more the furniture and that sort of thing. We're going to talk about these projects a bit, comparing them to each other, and talk about what we've gone through with them and the things that we've learned, and reflect on our experience with them more than the projects themselves. Some of the ideas are about the projects, but a lot of them are about maybe practice in general and how we see practice and our position within that, but mainly about the stuff that we just don't know. And that's kind of what we focus on a bit more. We've got a lot of questions, and that's what this is about. And yeah, because we don't want this to be a pretentious architecture talk, we're going to start it with a poem. It was written a few years ago when I was graduating and was quite cynical about the architecture world that I felt I was heading into as I was leaving university. It's a poem called I'm Gonna Build. I'm going to build a skyscraper and cover it in glass, or should I save the planet and wrap it up in grass? I'll design extraterrestrial sporting arenas where crowds will chant my name, shake hands with unelected leaders and say I haven't changed. I'll dance for my masters and work for them for free. Dad can pay my rent to get their name on my CV. Oh, that's the dream we're sold, and yes, we are consumers. Education is a commodity. Thank you, baby boomers. I'll cherry pick ideas from the history of art and quote philosophers because it makes me look right smart. If Sartre were a structural component, which one would he be? A steel tie in existential, stressed by absurdity. I got a semi-on for saturation in the monochrome parade. Crossed my legs to hide the truth, but it didn't go away. I was in the zone looking for answers, but nothing's as it seems. Lost track of time, and it doesn't help when the clock is stuck on 13. I watched another sunrise and amassed a bit more debt, building in the real world to feature on the internet. Told my mum not to worry, I'll have a job very soon. My fingers held behind my back as twisted as the truth. The world should be more grateful for a mind as great as mine, yet no one seems to give a shit about anything I design. But I'll never betray my morals or my beloved working class, and I'll never build a skyscraper unless the client politely asks.
Okay, so now we're going into the projects, but again, like what Sam was saying, we were going to talk about the projects, but more about our own thoughts and our own kind of approaches and what we've learned from these two projects. And the first kind of theme that we want to go into is this idea of having a client, or the idea of like self-initiation. And because these two projects that we're talking about, neither of them have had what we would see as a kind of conventional project structure, where we would have a client that commissions us, that kind of funds the design, and that is then built by a team of professionals. So, for example, the pavilion, that was completely self-initiated. Like Sam said, it was self-funded, and we built it without any permission from the site owner, from the council, from the neighbors, or for anyone. We just went and kind of did it. Because we are just very impatient, and we're very frustrated a lot of the times that the building process and the architecture process takes so long, and we just want to try things out. So over a period of 3 weeks, we designed the pavilion. We went over to Spain to build it, and we assembled it on site. Well, we kind of built it first in Sam's mom's garden, and then we took it to the site, and we had a nice opening where dogs came with their owners. And in terms of the funding, it was self-built, like I mentioned, from a bit of inheritance that Sam had from his grandma. And also we did a crowdfunding campaign. But the idea that we want to get out of this, with the fact that we don't have a client, is that we do have complete freedom, and obviously that comes with the perks, but also with a lot of kind of responsibility. So the idea of having a client is that that responsibility is taken away from you when you do have a client. That kind of, you have a purpose when you do it for someone else. So a lot of the time we ask ourselves, it's kind of in an existential way, like why are we doing this in the first place, and kind of what is our purpose? And we do waste a lot of time and energy on this question, and are looking for ways to be more confident and to be more decisive when it comes to new projects and ideas. And for the house, it was a somewhat different situation. Like with the pavilion, we designed and built everything ourselves, and we were in complete control over the design, but we did have a sort of a client, which was Sam's dad and his current wife, Anita. And this house, like I think you mentioned, it was built by your grandparents in the 60s, and it needed a lot of renovating. But the truth is that our clients, or supposed clients, that's Sam's dad and Anita, didn't actually want us to do the work, and we forced ourselves onto them, and it came onto basically went down into the financial reasons, where they had a really small budget, and they needed to renovate a full house of like 3 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, 2 bathrooms, everything, and we were the only one willing to do it, basically very little money, and with our own skills. So that was really the only option for them that was economically viable. And in the exchange of basically getting paid very little, we demanded almost complete control over the almost complete creative freedom over the project. And this is something that we struggle with because we still wanted to make something for them that was fit for purpose, but we just didn't have any kind of client architect discussion that you would normally have in a normal commission, right? So yeah, we did, unlike the pavilion, we did have a commission, but it just was a reluctant commission. So in conclusion, we would like a client. So we would like to have kind of this affirmation, this idea that we're doing something for someone. We're trying to kind of solve problems or discuss these things and kind of, but also that we want to please somebody. We want to make something that someone else would appreciate and kind of, or maybe not appreciate, but at least that there's a discussion, right? So we do feel a bit mixed about these projects because although we've learned a lot and we're very aware about the value of these projects as design as research, all these kind of the research, the learning that we've done of it. We at this point we're finding it very hard to get over the insecurity that basically nobody wants us to do work for them. Right. So now about the process in a bit more depth. There are, like I was mentioning, very very similar projects, but in terms of the process, they were very different. So the pavilion, we designed it beforehand in basically in Sam's bedroom in one night. We just a few sketches, and we did a little paper model, and then we went to Spade and just figured out how to kind of put it together. But it was kind of plonked on the sides. So although it was contextual in its kind of themes and ideas, it was also quite autonomous because it was just kind of placed there. With the house, however, that was different because although we had some ideas and about our intentions and what we wanted to do with it beforehand, when we arrived on site to do it on last February, we had no drawings, we had no plans, we had no sections, we had nothing, and we waited, or basically we had to take the building apart and see what we find there, but also live on site for a period of time for us to kind of design as we go. So in this way, the process of designing and the process of making it were almost completely synchronized with only a loose idea of a bigger vision. So we let basically the condition of the house, the characters of the rooms, how the light comes into every room, things like that, and also the very practicalities of things like it being a very cold and unhospitable house dictate our interventions there. And it was in this way a kind of a vernacular way of building where, like Mr. Iwan, the builder, comes on site, measures it and cuts something and builds it, So every decision was made, like I said, on the spot. And it's kind of interesting to reflect on this because it does raise the question for us about our ability to design and handle bigger things. Like what for the house especially, everything was broken down and handled separately, bit by bit, step by step. So we're curious how we would deal with having to submit full plans for a building in advance and then have those plans built by someone else, by actual team of professionals and contractors, and then collaborate about other things like structural things. And so although we are very kind of proud of ourselves and this agility that this way of working allows us, we also are quite anxious about, is this our limit? Like, how would we handle working at a bigger scale, basically?
Regarding the actual design of and the architecture of the projects, our approach was quite different with both of them because they both had very different ambitions and purposes. The pavilion was meant to be a fun, abstract, conceptual response to a quite absurd context in a way of these gated communities with swimming pools, a kind of an artificial glamour that's made within these gated fences, but outside is just a wasteland. So we wanted to take some of that glamour from the inside, the kind of real artificiality, and put it outside as a little moment of the outside, but also make something that had a bit of use and could actually bring people together to an extent outside. And we looked a lot at artists. We looked at people like pop artists, at people, David Hockney, Nick Hannes's photography was a really big factor in a lot of what we looked at, and making the way people use these spaces. And this mixture of leisure and pleasure, it's kind of funny and tragic, but also quite heartwarming. And in the end, it's kind of how things turned out with the project. And the idea of the swimming pool specifically was quite big. Like, we used pool tiles in the middle as the meeting area, and it was about symbolism largely. Whereas in the house there was very little symbolism. It was a lot more straightforward. The ideas were more fragmented in the house, and a lot less coherent on the whole, because we wanted to basically meet the practical requirements of the house. It was a very small budget, and we needed to do quite basic things with it, first and foremost. But then we did have a chance to have a little bit of a play around with some ideas, but the focus was mainly on atmosphere and moods of each rooms and what we wanted each space to feel like, with the hope that the overall composition would just fall together almost accidentally. And it wasn't a critical or ironic project like the pavilion was. It was still meant to be playful, but in a more kind of honest way. And we did have a very different way of working with the context and engaging with that. But we were a lot more nervous about dealing with the existing scenario with the house than we were with the pavilion. With the pavilion, we just sort of put it there, but with the house, we felt really tentative about everything that we would touch or take away, because we didn't want to detract too much from the existing character of the place. Obviously, in both situations, we were really limited by our own ability to make things and to our own craftsmanship that we had. But we just had to do it, and we just had to learn through doing it on both occasions. And the house had a lot more complexity dealing with this, and we learned a lot more practically from doing the house because of this. And I suppose as a design philosophy, there were elements of accidentism, just kind of things looking quite accidental. Some of them were accidental that happened there. And we just had to go with that. I think we couldn't ever be in control of that project fully, because we never knew what we were going to find. We just had to let the project take us where it will go and do what we can, where we can. But yeah, both designs, and I think we feel always that everything that we do is always sort of limited but defined by working with limited means. And it's maybe partly from our backgrounds and where we're from not having an abundance of maybe wealth or stuff or things to work with, that we like to work really with a little and try and make as much as we can with a little. But maybe it's too natural for us to do that, and too natural to default to that. So we're always kind of questioning this thing of like, that challenge is great to try and achieve a lot with a little, but how would we manage if we had a load of money to do something with? Like, if we had the kind of build your dream house thing, our dream house is building it with no money. And so it's really tricky to think how we'd cope with such a thing. And we do worry, like, are we purely limited by being able to work in a context of having nothing to really work with? And could we make something that was actually quite nice with more resources? But you could also say that this does kind of make us ultimately very sustainable architects, although we'd never claim to be so. Every architect's trying to be that, but I guess we are, because we just don't really build anything. Another point, going back to image 2 if we've got it, but it doesn't matter if we haven't. Another point, after the design and building it, that we're always talking about and that we find really fascinating, and we're really interested in just images and what images mean, really. And we think they're really important for architects for a lot of reasons, but especially for young architects who might not have any projects that you've actually built, because of the only way of communicating what you might have in your head. And even with architects who have built things, so like we've built a couple of things here and there, and for us, all that remains of them are the images. The projects themselves are kind of gone from us now. And yeah, we end up scraping around at the end of these projects just trying to get images in the very last second, when really we should probably give them a lot more thought and a lot more attention to what we're doing with them, because afterwards we put in so much work for these projects, then we leave and we look at the images we've got and we're like, is that all we've got from this afterwards? So we think the documentation of the project we need to take more seriously. We should probably take it as seriously as the project itself. And for example, in this week, in Romanian Design Week, it's not the cottage that's been exhibited, it's the images of the cottage, the drawings and the photographs. And we're not fully at ease with that, but it was the same with the pavilion. We got published based entirely on images, and we kind of look at what we do, and ultimately what we kind of do is make images. I mean, we're questioning this all the time. Do we make architecture or do we make images? And should we go with that? Should we just embrace it as a kind of millennial condition, or should we try to challenge that situation? We're very unsure about this, and we don't know what we feel about it. We feel quite strongly about making important spaces that go well beyond the images. But if we don't take the images seriously, we're not gonna get anywhere. So yeah, I think we look at how we deal with this, and the thing that we see now is just we need to treat our image making with a far higher degree of intentionality than we have done so far for certain. But the impact of the images that we do make more or less relate to the design bubble that we're in now. But we do also like to experiment with breaking outside of that bubble. And yeah, so we've done some less conventional things. For example, putting the project on TripAdvisor, which was a really interesting way of getting people to give feedback about. We're having issues with the sound, apparently. A bit close to the mic. Yeah, so we've done some less conventional things, like putting the pavilion on TripAdvisor, which got some really useful feedback, interesting feedback from people living nearby. And we did treat this with an element of irony and a joke, but it was quite good in what people thought about it and how they commented on it outside of the conventional design bubble as we see it, the usual magazines, the usual exhibitions. And at Romanian Design Week, we popped a few booklets there because we weren't keen on the idea of just images, so we kind of slid in there with our booklet a little subversively. Yeah, we do also have a few booklets around and about this space if anybody's interested in seeing them or taking them with them. But yeah, we do feel a bit mixed about this, because images are in one sense true and they're real, but they are at the same time a fabrication and a lie, which we depend on for our entire profession. And they also play into the idea that we don't really like of the building or the projects that we do as a static, finished thing that doesn't change. The photos hold that moment as if that's what the project is, but of course it's not. The projects change, they move on, and they take on their own lives afterwards.
Now, so talking about the life that buildings take afterwards and a certain degree of kind of letting go that you have to have, but at the same time, the responsibility that you have to take when you put a project out there in the world. And in both of these projects, there has been a level of a degree of transformation since we left them and since we froze that moment in photographs. And obviously that moment that we froze in photographs is the moment that we feel most comfortable showing and displaying, but at the same time we cannot kind of lie to ourselves that the fact that the projects have taken a life of their own afterwards, and some of that might not have been our intended life. So with the pavilion, at first it was only meant to be a temporary thing anyway, but at first it was used as we intended, as a place for dog walkers, to local people to come and sit and have a meet and rest in the shade and have a chat. But after a few months, a group of homeless people actually moved into the pavilion and basically took it apart and rebuilt it as a shelter for their own purposes. And this is the condition in that photograph that we found it when we went back 1 year later. And conceptually, obviously, we very much like and we're very interested by the fact that the pavilion was reappropriated and it did have a second life that we didn't initially plan for. And we see this as some sort of a creative reuse, but we also can't help but take a more realistic and practical view that sees this pavilion as being now a ruin, and a place that was meant for the wider public to be able to gather was transformed into a place where people were scared to go into because it pretty much was turned into a slum. So we worried that then it became a burden to the community rather than a nice asset. So eventually, a few months of that, the council had to come and remove the pavilion at a cost to the, obviously, taxpayers' money, and that this thing obviously doesn't sit easy with us. The house is a little bit different. It was only recently finished, and I had a chance to go there a few months later. And although we expected obviously the place to have changed, so it was taken over and reappropriated by the clients, your dad and Anita, it was still very hard to see that despite knowing that they didn't really like what we have done with the place, they were actively kind of trying to undo a lot of that we had done, and we have to accept this. We understand that the project is no longer ours, even though we lived there for almost a year, and now we need to move on. But it's still very raw and a bit emotional. It's quite hard to talk about it, but obviously we know that this lesson will prove very valuable as we move forward. And although we know that we are proud of what we had achieved, it's kind of the overwhelming feeling of that project now is kind of sadness and kind of failure as well, because it wasn't loved. So a bit of a longer conclusion. That's actually more of some new points. But what is the other way that we talked about in the title of this talk? These are two projects that we are very much proud of. But they're also projects that are heavily flawed in many ways, and also in the way in which we have approached them. And they also reveal the flaws in us and in how we work, and our doubts and our insecurities that we have as a studio. But we think that it's those things that are more important and relevant to talk about than the projects themselves. And so the reason we have done this event is because partly we do find ourselves in a moment where we are deeply self-reflecting and almost confused also about where we might be going, what is our identity as a designer, and we are still finding a position. And we do see ourselves as very contradictory in how we operate. And for example, when it comes to context, on the one hand, we'd like to completely immerse ourselves in the context of our project and deeply understand the places where we're working, where obviously you grew up in Spain, and we've spent every summer there for a few years' time, and we've done so much research on the area. And then with the house, the fact that we went to live on site for 9 months while we were building it. And we do feel this kind of responsibilities for the places that we work in, and we take the interventions that we put there very seriously. But at the same time, we're also very unrooted and we're placeless. We don't really have a real base. Like, our office is on Facebook and WhatsApp and on Instagram, and we don't feel like we belong anywhere. So maybe we do use our projects as a way to search for some of this belonging we strive for as a studio? Question mark. As you see, we are really unsure about a lot of these things, but we also think that that this is normal, and it should be normal, and this is not something to kind of despair about and feel self-pitying. And the whole point is that all of our 3 studios came together today not to do a self-congratulatory event, but to be honest. And we think that this is something very valuable, and through our discussions it has transpired that we do want to be more honest and more supportive and more open and collaborative with one another about these kind of struggles and doubts of young designers, and about finding our place in the world. And some of the things that we have spoken about are the things we speak about all the time, but it's like this idea that you can't say these things in public, that you have to present your projects with confidence and self-assurance, but that is far from the truth a lot of the time. And we think that these things like doubt and vulnerability and acknowledging weaknesses and mistakes are fundamental to being good designers. And although they are rarely addressed in lectures, and in things like the Romanian Design Week, which again focuses on this like final image as the what you take away from the project. We know that behind all of these good ideas, there is a lot that is hidden and bad. So it's good to talk about all this stuff. But at the same time, we don't want to be disingenuous. We might make out that we don't know what we're doing a lot of the time, because that is true. But ultimately, we're going to be as honest as we choose to be. And it's been a long time since we've had an audience. And of course, we want it all to go well. And obviously reflect well on us. And the truth is that we feel that a lot of what we've done probably doesn't reflect that well on us, so we've left it out. So I think you should probably be skeptical of us for claiming to be righteous about not picking up our own projects, but about being open and vulnerable. But because in reality, we have flown across the continent in the middle of the pandemic and the climate crisis, just because we had a chance of some people who might want to listen to us talk about ourselves. So we are obviously just as flawed as many of the people that we are many of the practices that we are kind of trying to question and maybe criticize, but we're trying to improve that. So it's always a kind of a give and take. But in conclusion, we do believe that the old models of practicing design and architecture are becoming increasingly unfit for the world that we live in when it comes to the economic model, the work and life balance, and the sense of responsibility that young people now feel for the places that we're making. So we don't think that the solution is one thing, but like with many things, it's many different ways and many different solutions and many ways of doing things. So this is why we see the studio ourselves, the studio itself, like Estudio ESSE, as something of a project itself and a means to explore and reflect on many of the things that are important to us. And that's something that obviously I take into my own practice as a lecturer at the University at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston, where I speak to the students about other ways that they can move on from their student days later into practice. And we do take a lot of inspiration and motivation from others who are also finding their way and they creating their own possibilities. So we, in general, most of all, welcome discussion, ideas, and openness, and this is what we're trying to achieve with this event. And I think that's enough from us now. So, yes, I think now we'll hear from Stardust Architects, that's Brindusa and Anca. Thank you.
Keep it close. Okay. Hello. We are Anca and Brindusa from Stardust, and we are still enchanted by Studio ESSE presentation. It was really, really nice to hear all your questions and this honest, let's say, confession about your practice. And of course, we share so many of your questions and doubts and insecurities. So it was really, really nice listening to you. And of course, we are very happy about the invitation to take part of this event. We actually discovered their practice on the Romanian Design Week list. and we were really excited about their approach and really playful and bold projects. And of course, it's nice to share this talk with the girls from Super.Serios. So usually we talk a lot, so we kind of planned to try tonight to be short. We don't know if we will succeed in that. But we tried to talk, we made a short structure, let's say, about some themes that are recurrent, let's say, in our projects. And yeah, we are also using the support of two projects, let's say, and we'll try to talk about these themes. Yeah, just making reference to these two projects that are, let's say, our latest bigger projects in a way. So the themes that we find relevant, let's say, the first one, we called it, let's say, responsibility. That's the bigger title. And the questions are, first of all, always questioning the project and the theme and wondering what's the afterlife of the project and what happens afterwards. Also, what resources do we have and what can we always, let's say, reuse. Yeah, another theme would be that of looking for atmospheres through immersive experiences and collective experiences, and also trying to integrate, let's say, domestic rituals into collective experiences. And then about the process, experimenting and contemporary crafts. The projects that we support our presentation on are an interior design for Meșteșugar Boutique. I don't know if you can see the image. There is also one set of images there. If you, so it was a competition for an interior design project for Meșteșugar Boutique, which is a social enterprise that tries to connect Roma craftsmen with contemporary designers. And they wanted a new design for their shop. And for us, it was more important, let's say, what they promoted, that, let's say, not the shop itself, but the way they try to recover the crafts. And we wanted to, this space, to talk more about that and to invite you to get closer to the craft itself. Also, we imagined through the competition project that some of the pieces could be made with their craftsmen, with the people that they collaborate. So we intentionally proposed like copper joints and all these details that could be made by the craftsmen. Also, the shop was initially close to the university, the architecture university, and we were thinking that maybe the process, the building process itself, could be an opportunity to organize a couple of workshops with the students, and yeah, so the building process could have been more open and engaging. Yeah, I think I can stop with the introduction.
Okay. Do a test. Can you speak now? You don't need that anymore. Let's see if it we'll get some feedback now if it's working better.
You want to see it basically, if it's better just speaking to the phone.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. What's the feedback on that? Is the sound better? Yeah, but
Okay, because we were having a lot of messages saying we can't hear anything.
right. So should we? But just keep it closer to your mouth. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Let's see now if I get back in.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I also want to thank you for the invitation, and I'm extremely happy to hear your presentation because, yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to I don't know, to hear all this discussion about the insecurities. I really find it very useful to all of us, and it is true that we really have to push this kind of discussions. It's also true that I mean, I think we had the first opportunity to talk about this a few years ago when I told you a bit about this. There was this series of lectures which was dedicated to young architects, especially young designers, let's say. It was organized by Calup, and the series of the events was named Onset. And yeah, we also were meeting there, especially to talk about all our problems, our insecurities, our moments of not knowing where to go, and so forth. So it's a very valuable discussion. But today we kind of structured, let's say, our presentation on, in a way, if you want, it's not really what doesn't work, but maybe let's say some solutions that we have found on our way, because we have been doing this for 10 years and we have had a lot of very hard moments, let's say, when we were also asking ourselves, are we on the right track? Should we continue? Maybe we should stop. I mean, almost every year we have this question. So it's perfectly normal, and it's very important that we talk about this all the time so that we can learn from each other and so forth. But yeah, let's say this type of structure that we have thought about for today, it's like containing I would name it something like positive resistance. So some key ways in which we have found the way to get over the hard moments, let's say. So I will continue with what Anca said. This idea of thinking about the afterlife of the project, it's also nice because you ended up with this subject. So the second project that we will use to sustain this structure is a project that we have. It's in a way still ongoing. We have done it. We have started it in 2019. And it's the main exhibition of the Timișoara Architecture Biennial. It's called Enough is Enough, and it was on the theme of the responsibility, and it took place in October 2020 in Timișoara. Right now, it just finished its shorter edition in Belgrade, and hopefully it will also travel to Belgrade. To Budapest. Yes. So. This idea of thinking about the afterlife of the project, it's something that we tried to let's say to incorporate in the projection moment, the moment in which, yeah. So of course you don't really want to think about all the afterlife of the project. It's very good to let it live by its own, but if we talk about if you talk about an exhibition, the way in which we thought it is responsible to think about it was, it was a pretty big exhibition. So we had this huge space of 1,400 square meters. We gathered there around 50 projects, responsible projects, and we realized that in order to be able to exhibit all those projects, we are going to need a lot of objects, exhibition support that might afterwards get into Beta's depository and, you know, like produce a lot just for 1 month of an exhibition. So that was one of the motives which made us decide to think about another way of putting up this exhibition, and we realized that a very good way to do that would be to use a garden to team up with local landscapers, and this way to have something that after the exhibition can have a more meaningful life for a group of people, for a community in Timișoara. And fortunately we managed to do that, meaning that this garden that you can see here, which was in the exhibition, was actually planted afterwards in a green space that the landscape designers found. Yeah, I should also mention their names, which they are Raluca Rusu and Alex Ciobota from Timișoara, so two local landscape designers with whom we collaborated very well. So yeah, this big part of the exhibition ended up becoming a garden, and we really want to visit it when we go to Timișoara soon. So yeah, that was one way of thinking of the afterlife of the exhibition, and of course we also tried to reuse a lot of what they had already produced for the former exhibition. So we in a, let's say something like 30% of the exhibition we used what they already had. And another thing was that we have also tried to invite friends, collaborators that we knew that they already produced some other types of design. For example, there was Tudor who had made a very big table for Romanian Design Week's edition in 2017, and we also tried to use that object for the exhibition. I will get...
Okay, so we are kind of role-playing. I'm talking about Meșteșugar and Brindusa, about the exhibition Enough is Enough. Okay, I will try to speak louder and keep the microphone closer. Going back to Meșteșugar and to this first theme about the afterlife of the project, another way of looking at this question, let's say, was that of thinking what would happen if, for example, they change a bit the space, or if they move to another space, what actually happened, because now Meșteșugar moved to a different location, which is actually really close to the place where we are here. And so we imagined a very flexible structure that could adapt, first of all, to the different experiences that they could host in the shop, and then to a different space. Okay, so as I was saying, it was a competition entry that we did together with Ștefan from Atelier Vast and Theo, Teodora Caprărobescu. She was a student back then, and all of us were very involved in the building process as well. Okay, so the second subject that we wanted to touch was that of atmospheres. As I was saying earlier, that we kind of look for this type of immersive atmosphere. Let's say we think about this kind of experience that tackles your senses and makes you be more present and more aware. And at Meșteșugar, we imagined this very tactile place. We imagined it first being covered in clay, so it was like a very unitary skin, let's say. And inside this skin, we had this installation, wood installation, that was like like an oversized tool, like a loom, an extra oversized loom. But of course, one problem that we had from the beginning was that we had a very limited time frame and a limited budget. So all these plans that I was talking about, that we wanted to work with students, to do workshops, and to work with craftsmen, and to do this clay skin, were actually impossible. And we had to find solutions in a very, very limited time and budget. Yeah, we had to improvise a bit. Okay, so that was about the immersive experience. Then we were saying that we are also trying to generate collective spots in the spaces. So areas that kind of bring people together, and all these tools, this flexible structure from Meșteșugar was actually built around a very long collective table, a working table. We saw it as as a working table because we are thinking that in this atmosphere of a workshop, it should invite you and make it easier for you to grab a chair and to sit there and to touch the materials and just to start learning the craft. I actually forgot to show that's the sketch that Teodora did it for this table for the competition. Yeah, that's also the general atmosphere that I actually showed earlier. This is another way of creating a collective experience, let's say. So in this structure, we envisioned an actual loom that we kind of improvised. We built it together with these threads, and we thought that maybe besides the shop and all the other activities, they also wanted to be a cafe, let's say, and we imagined that you could get a coffee and start to do some threads on this loom, and some other can continue, and it can be a collective piece that they could sell maybe in the shop. I think that would be about it.
Yeah, okay, so trying to continue with this parallel look. So talking about the immersive atmospheres and the collective experiences in the exhibition Enough is Enough. So of course, obviously the choice of using the garden was also about first of all, thinking about the way the normal experiences that we have had in architecture exhibitions, and the fact that not only the organizers, Beta, but also we wanted to, let's say, to make an exhibition which is very accessible to the general public, so we can have a dialogue about architecture with not only between fellow architects, let's say. It was also about this getting out of this formula of the exhibition, which is only using panels and text and drawings and so forth. But we also wanted to have some individual moments, so moments of reflection, moments in which you can feel like, let's say, in a botanical garden and so forth. And we have also, we wanted very much to have a lot of material objects and samples of the materials that all the authors have used in their process of working with their in their project. And we, related to that, we had this very nice feedback, because there was this a workshop with the kids from the Arhitectura, and they were trying to imagine different ways of using the space, and one of the kids said that they would name this moment of the space in which the exhibition was mounted there, Clasera, which is a Romanian mixture of a greenhouse and a classroom. And we really thought, that especially during the pandemics, we really thought that this was a nice idea, let's say. So about the collective experiences in the exhibition, there was a kitchen. A meta kitchen, let's say, and this is something which I will come back to later. So the kitchen was the place in which all the workshops took place, and while we had no workshops, you could see the results of the workshop, so a lot of samples, a lot of objects, let's say, working with the materials from the projects. This is this is the same kitchen in Belgrade outside. We had a very small installation that we did with Vlad Albu, and this is the map, the small map of Timișoara. So we just drew the limits of the quarters in the neighborhoods in Timișoara, and we have invited the visitors of the exhibition to plant seeds, vegetable seeds, in their own neighborhood. And another collective gathering.
Okay, so the last was that of the process itself, and although we are not design and build till the end, as Studio has told earlier about their practice, we actually try to imply as much as we can building part of ourselves, and we are also concerned about or try to question, let's say, the role of contemporary crafts, and we try to experiment as much as we can. So, at one of the situations that, as I was saying, we are having Stefan in the design team, but we also had him in the production process, Stefan with Atelier Vast, and we proposed some, it's actually a very simple, flexible structure, but it showed up it was not that simple in the end. We proposed these round pillars that you can see here in the drawing, and the round pillars seem that they're not that easy to be produced, to be done. We actually call them the flute pillars because they have this, holes that help the flexibility of the structure. And as I was saying earlier, we really had to do this in a very short time frame. To find producers, workshops in Romania that had a huge machine. It's actually strung in Romanian. I'm not, I don't know the English word, but it's this machine that does, round elements, wood elements. And we had to find one big enough for these long pillars. And it wasn't possible in that time frame. So we tried with Atelier Vast to find a solution, and they came up with this, with some sort of invented tool that was part this strung and part a CNC, and so a computer generated that did this, succeeded in rounding our pillars. In the end, we wanted to keep the traces of this tool in the design itself, in the objects. So a detail came up in the end from the production process, which is this, detail that you can see here and keeps the, let's say, the traces of the tool. Yeah, and in this round holes, you could fix some other pieces in, there are many possibilities of bringing together this display system. Also, I was saying at the beginning that we imagine in the competition these copper pieces that were, of course, time consuming, and it was difficult to find somebody to do it. But then again, it was something important that we wanted to keep, and Atelier Vast came with these solutions. For example, here we had some supports for the pillars, copper supports that would help change the position of the pillars in the space and to rearrange everything. And then there were these little elements that helped in this meeting between wood pieces. Also, about the tactile skin of the shop, we wanted to work with clay, but it was not possible. The actual walls were made of gypsum, plasters, so it was impossible to cover them in clay, and we had to improvise and to find solutions together with a guy who did all the construction part, Alex Dinulescu, and we did together a lot of tests, very, very simple solutions of mixing pigments with different types of plasters, so things that were really, I don't know, cheap and easy to find. And in the end, we kind of got this, let's say, very warm and kind of terracotta hue that we found really, let's say, appropriate for this immersive workshop atmosphere.
Yeah, so the dreams from from the beginning of the project of, for example, working all the copper elements with the craftsmen that were exhibiting jewelry and stuff like that in the shop weren't at all possible. So yeah, it's like every time. But I mean, anyhow, what's also very important for us is the fact that we have been collaborating with Atelier Vasts ever since 2017, and this is another way of positive resistance, for example, because it's, I mean, before that it was extremely hard to take this kind of relationship from ground zero, because right now we are, of course, it counts very much that Stefan is also an architect because we speak the same language, but it's not only that, it's also the fact that we have come to know each other so well that it's only a sketch and he knows very well what he is supposed to do. So yeah, this is long-term relationships with collaborators is also something which saves a lot of effort and really makes the project done. Also about crafts and surprises and improvisation, let's say an amount of leaving the project open, let's say, in beta was working with a craftsman, a weaver. So we wanted to have this cone which has a circular base made out of hazelnut, and it was an adventure because we found him and we explained that we have a 6-meter diameter cone and we need this base to be done properly, and he was very much afraid that it was not going to be a perfect circle. And we were trying to explain that there's not a problem, and he was like, it's going to look like a children drawing. And we were, yeah, it's perfect. Let it be like that. And it was actually a very nice surprise for all of us, because all the time, because of the humidity of the plants, all the entire month it was changing its form, and it was always changing in due to the atmosphere around. So yeah, it is this kind of, we never knew if we are going to be able to mount it until the last day, the last minute, let's say. We had alpinists, so people to climb the structure. We already needed that for the panels, but yeah, we also used for this, and we really didn't knew if it was going to work until we mounted. So it's always like that. It's always like a lot of experiment, a lot of improvisation, but somehow with always with the right teams, it goes along. So yeah, I will stop because I think we also we again spoke too much. So yeah, thanks again.
we're gonna we're gonna start. We are Teodora and I am Maria, and we're Super.Serios, and we're really happy to be here. We were really excited to hear about the presentations by Estudio ESSE and hear about their projects that we didn't actually get to see, but by hearing their process, I think we understand more about them right now. And also Stardust Architects, their projects, we know them quite well, actually. We've been part of their exhibition at Beta, and we knew they were super awesome, but it was great to hear more insight into that. So, yeah. And also, thank you, Studio ESSE, for inviting us, and Stirbei 47 for hosting us. We are a studio that I don't know, more experimental than the ones before, but we're a mixture of urban studies and playful media. That's because Teodora is an urban.
I'm an architect that I do my PhD in urban studies. And Maria does her PhD in playful media. So we started thinking about how we can combine these two, and we came with a concept of creating urban games, games that help us explore our cities through different kind of
through a media that's playful and that is participatory and gets involvement from people that would otherwise not play and not hear and not be interested in these urban issues.
For this presentation, we will talk about two games that we developed last year during the pandemic crisis. One of them was created at WASP Bucharest. It's Far Too Close, in Romanian Aproape Departe, which plays with physical distancing rules, and the other one is a game that we developed at the Simultan Festival in Timișoara, also last year. And the second game plays with the concept of urban systems. So on the first game, Aproape Departe, it's a pun. We were joking about how can we play with the distancing rules and how can this situation become a game for us.
I think we were actually making the game before about the city, and there was the corona thing, and that came thing that actually saved the game because it's one of the main rules that you have to stay far from the others, and this way you're actually blocking them, and the game actually becomes very engaging for everybody. So yeah, that's the way how Corona helped us last year.
Yeah, I mean, what Maria was saying is that we kind of recycled creativity, because the main concept was developed for a contest in Vienna with Diana Michiu and Raisa Parpală, and it was playing. It was a game that played with with opinions and how our opinions move us through space. From that game, we developed Aproape Departe, playing with urban images, and you can see here we started playing on a piece of paper, and then we thought how can we bring this game from the piece of paper into the gallery art space, and we started testing it at WASP because it was an open laboratory. that took place, I think, 1 month or 2 weeks, something like that. We had people that came and tested and played with us, and
during August and September.
yeah, and we came up with together with them with rules and other dynamics for the play.
Just one thing, you just had to pass through, this was like a city, and you had to pass through it and actually narrate your journey through the city from one place to another, and verbalize the things that happen through this journey, and actually this way become more conscious about how we go through the city and how we, I don't know, how it affects us.
Yeah, so you can see here, you can see it, right? the board game that has different symbols, and we didn't want to create positive or negative aspects with these images, so we let the player decide if that was a good urban image or not. And yeah, we also tried to illustrate the rules. We didn't want to come up with words, so you had to mask up when you came inside the gallery space. And after we played it at WASP, how was it with the high schools?
We actually, together with the people at WASP, we went to high schools in Romania, one in Sinaia and one in Ploiești, and we installed the game in the school yard, and this is one photo from there. We did this together with the high schoolers, so there were some that helped us install it, and others that came and played. It was really interesting to see that they were not the same kids that did both things. They were. That's probably because some people are more interested in creating stuff, and others are more interested in playing or in becoming performers, because the game actually has a performative side to it. And it was a really cool experience of going from something that's very, in a way, I don't know, not very in context, and place it in a certain context that gives it more of an understanding that we had at this white cube that's at WASP. And also having different types of public. That's really cool. The second game is System in the Room, which we did in Timișoara at the Simultan Festival in October of last year. And it starts from a diagram by Mariana Celac and they have a book from the 80s on urban planning. I think Theo can tell you more about the book, because so it's more of a theoretical piece.
So yeah, I don't want to go on.
I think it's more like a mixture of mathematics and urban studies, and it has a lot of diagrams that are really interesting and helpful in understanding things about urban planning, but they aren't very easy to understand. So you just look at this book and you can read and you can hear about it, but it's not something that a normal person would actually have access to. So this was our challenge, to create something that can bring this closer to people who actually live in these theories. So this is why we created a System in the Room. we had one room where we introduced this system that they developed. And through this game, we allowed people to experience through their bodies and through movement how urban structures actually work and how they relate to one another. I think we can. This is a picture from the actual installation. At WASP, it had the concepts on the margins of the room, and in the center there was this circle that you could spin. And there was also on the walls some drawings and diagrams also from their book, but reinterpreted by us and by Anca, which helped us. And you could explore them actually through using a red filter, which was available there in an analog form, but you could also use augmented experience, so actually Instagram filter to decode these drawings on the walls. So this installation actually worked both as a game and as an installation that you could explore by yourself even when it wasn't played. This is when it was actually played, and it worked really well. It started one way and then the rules changed. We like this very much, to let players change the rules. So we have a set of rules that can work, but they can also propose their own, because, for example, here they are mostly architects and artists, yeah. And they proposed a more relaxed rule where they could discuss more and where they could exchange opinions. And we actually want to play this game afterwards to see how it goes, and also on the rules they set, but we can change them. And of course, we're making more games and exploring these things in the future. So thank you.
So thanks very much for these presentations from Stardust and from Super.Serios. I think this has been a very, when we set out to do this talk, we didn't envision the kind of the breadth of and the variety of the projects and the thoughts and the kind of extra other ideas that we kind of now have following you guys' presentation. So we would really like to continue this on. So if you online have any questions or any comments, anything you want to ask or you want to add, please write in the comment section. And also anyone here from us, if anyone has anything to add or ask, then yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I do have a question. Yeah, it's a question for Stardust, really, about this nature of the collaboration with VAST. I think is quite interesting, because what you have with them is kind of everything that we do in a very condensed way. And when you were working before kind of collaborating so much with Vast, like basically how did you start, and how did you approach the designs differently before this collaboration to now when you kind of have this collaboration and you know who can, like how you can make stuff and this extra arm of your practice that you have to do stuff, like how was it before and how did you go in this transition between the different positions?
Okay, so thank you for the question. I think that before this collaboration, which was like, as Brindusa said, we started working together in 2017. And I think that earlier, we actually also had smaller projects that we kind of was always difficult to start, you know, a new, to find the right collaborator, and it took us a lot and made the project last longer, obviously. And I also think that, and I'm thinking about this now, that the collaboration with Atelier Vaz gave us more courage, I think, to try different material, to try different details. That before that, maybe we were looking for safer solutions, I think, for the interior design projects, for example, for private clients. We wouldn't risk maybe much into very experimental details. And I think the relationship with them, the collaboration with them, gave us more courage and yeah, let us experiment in different ways. And what is also nice is that they get involved. We start to collaborate from the design moment, when we try to talk and to look for different samples, materials, and to see how to understand how the materials work. It was a learning experience for us as well, because now we know